the evening had arrived the way it always does, quietly, without announcement, slipping through the cracks of the day like velvet poured through an open hand. The world outside had begun to dim. The fierce orange of the setting sun surrendering to softer tones of lilac and dove gray, and the air itself seemed to exhale, releasing the tension it had carried through the bright, demanding hours. Somewhere beyond the window, a bird sang its final, unhurried note, and then even that small sound dissolved into the growing hush. She had been thinking about sleep for hours before sleep actually came near her. That was the way of it, wasn't it? The harder you reached for it, the further it drifted, like trying to catch moonlight in a jar. Her body was tired deeply, honestly tired, but her mind still hummed with the static of the day. Unfinished conversations, half-remembered tasks, the quiet anxieties that nestle in the chest like sleeping birds that refuse to stay asleep. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, she had decided to stop reaching. She lay on her back first, feeling the mattress hold her the way a slow river holds a fallen leaf, without grip, without demand, just a gentle, yielding support. Her fingers traced the edge of the blanket, and she noticed, with a small and surprising pleasure, how soft it was. She had owned this blanket for months, perhaps longer, and yet tonight was the first time she had truly felt its texture against her skin. The weave was slight and irregular, the kind of fabric that carries warmth not through thickness, but through something more tender. The way a whispered word can warm more than a shouted one. She turned onto her side, pulling her knees closer to her chest, and let her eyes drift half closed. The room was dark enough now that the outlines of furniture had become suggestions rather than statements. The dresser in the corner was no longer a dresser. It was a tall, quiet shape standing watch. The chair by the window had become a silhouette with a secret. Everything in the room had softened, as though the darkness were not absence of light, but a presence of its own, a kindly presence, one that smoothed the sharp edges and muted the loud colors, and said, without words, "You may rest now." And she breathed. She breathed the way you breathe when you have nowhere else to be and nothing else to solve. The air came in through her nose, cool, faintly carrying the ghost of the lavender sachet she kept on the nightstand, and it filled her lungs slowly, completely, until her ribs expanded like the gentle opening of a flower she had never seen but somehow recognized. Then the air left, taking with it a small measure of the day's weight, carrying it out into the room where it dissolved into nothing, into the harmless dark. She breathed again and again, and with each exhale, the world outside her body became a little less important, a little more distant, as though she were a small boat that had been tied to a noisy dock and was now, finally, loosening its rope. The silence in the room was not empty. She realized this with a kind of quiet wonder. The silence was full of tiny, delicate sounds that she had never noticed because she had never been still enough to hear them. There was the faintest rustle of the curtain as the air from the slightly open window moved through it, like a dress being gently shaken out. There was the barely perceptible creak of the house settling into itself, the way an old person settles into a favorite chair with a satisfied sigh. There was the sound of her own heartbeat, not urgent, not anxious, but steady and calm. A drum being played very, very softly in a room where no one was demanding a faster rhythm. And beneath all of these sounds, or perhaps woven through them, there was a hum, not a mechanical hum, not the hum of electricity or plumbing, but something older and stranger. The hum of the world itself turning, the way a potter's wheel hums when the clay is being shaped with care and without hurry. She listened to that hum, and it listened to her in return, and between them, a kind of agreement was made. You may rest now. Yes, I think I will. The first story came to her not as a thought, but as a sensation, a warmth that began in her chest and spread outward through her arms and into her fingertips, like the feeling of holding a cup of tea that has been brewed to the exact right temperature. Not too hot, not too cool, just warm enough to make you close your eyes and say quietly to no one, yes. And in that warmth, a forest appeared. It was not a frightening forest. There were no dark spaces between the trees where things waited and watched. This forest was old in the way that kindness is old, not worn out, not diminished, but deepened and made more itself by the passage of years. The trees were tall, impossibly tall, their trunks wide enough that 3 people standing hand in hand could not have circled them, and their bark was the color of deep cinnamon, warm and rich, with grooves and ridges that caught the filtered light and held it the way the lines of a palm hold a story. The light in this forest was extraordinary. It came from everywhere and from nowhere. It was not sunlight. The sky above the canopy was not visible, hidden by a lattice of branches that interlocked like the fingers of sleeping giants. And yet the forest was not dark. A soft, golden luminescence seemed to emanate from the moss that carpeted the ground, from the lichen that dusted the bark in patterns of silver and pale green, from the very air itself, as though the forest were breathing light the way a person breathes warmth on a cold morning. She walked through this forest, though she did not feel her feet moving. She floated, or rather, she was carried, not by any force or current, but by the simple, unhurried momentum of peace. The air here smelled of rain that had fallen long ago, and of soil that had been turned slowly and carefully by roots that knew no rush. It smelled of fern, of the dark sweetness of decay that is not ending but becoming, of the quiet alchemy that turns what falls into what grows. And the sounds, oh, the sounds. Somewhere nearby, water was moving, not rushing, not crashing, but slipping over smooth stones with a sound so gentle it was almost a voice that spoke in a language older than words, a language of shush and hush and soon, soon, soon. Each ripple, each tiny cascade was a syllable in a sentence that had no end and needed none, because its meaning was not in its conclusion, but in its continuing. She moved toward the sound, and the forest opened before her like a book being opened by hands that loved the story within. The stream appeared through a curtain of hanging moss, long silver-green threads that swayed in a breeze she could not feel, but could hear, a whispering that was almost laughter, almost a lullaby, almost the sound a mother makes when she is not singing, but simply humming near her sleeping child, offering the comfort of her presence without the demand of melody. The stream was narrow and clear, so clear that the stones at its bottom seemed lit from within, each one a small jewel of amber and quartz and slate, polished by centuries of patient water into shapes that were not geometric, not planned, but perfect in the way that only things shaped by time and care can be perfect. She knelt beside the stream, and now she could feel the moss beneath her knees, cool and damp and impossibly soft, like kneeling on a cushion made of clouds and memory. And she looked down into the water. Her reflection looked back at her, but it was not the reflection she saw in mirrors during the waking hours. That reflection was always slightly tense, slightly guarded, carrying in the set of the jaw and the furrow between the brows the residue of things done and things still to do. But the reflection in this stream was different. The face was softer. The eyes were heavier lidded, not with fatigue, with something like surrender, the good kind of surrender, the kind that comes not from defeat, but from the recognition that you have been fighting a battle that no longer needs fighting. The reflection smiled at her, not a wide smile, not a performative smile, but the smallest possible upturning of the lips, the kind of smile that means I see you, and you are allowed to be exactly as you are. She smiled back, and the stream carried on, and the moss swayed on, and the forest breathed on, and she felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, that she was not behind and not ahead. She was exactly where she was, and where she was enough. A path appeared beside the stream, not a paved path, not a marked trail, but a gentle suggestion of a way forward, indicated by nothing more than a slight thinning of the ferns and a scattering of flat stones that rose just above the moss like the keys of some enormous, silent instrument. She followed it, not because she needed to arrive anywhere, but because following felt like the right thing to do, the way turning the pages of a beloved book feels right, not driven by curiosity about the ending, but by the pleasure of the words as they pass. The path wound through the forest in long, lazy curves, the kind of curves that a river makes when it is in no hurry to reach the sea, when it is content to explore the land it moves through, touching each bend and hollow with equal attention, finding no place more worthy of its presence than any other. As she walked or floated or was carried, she began to notice the small things, the way a single dewdrop clung to the tip of a fern frond, catching the golden light and holding it like a tiny lantern. The way a spider's web stretched between two branches, its threads so fine they were visible only because of the moisture that clung to them, each droplet a bead on a necklace no one would ever wear, but that was, in its secret way, more beautiful than any necklace Alice ever made. The way the bark of one particular tree had a pattern in it that looked, if you tilted your head just slightly, like a face. Not a human face, not an animal face, but the face of something kind and ancient that had been watching over this forest since before the concept of watching had been invented. She paused before this tree. She placed her hand against the bark, and it was warm. Not the warmth of sunlight absorbed during the day. There was no sun here, but the warmth of something alive, something that had been alive for so long that its life had become indistinguishable from the life of the forest itself. She could feel beneath her palm a pulse, slow, so slow that if she had not been perfectly still, she would have missed it entirely. A pulse like the tide, a pulse like the turning of the earth, a pulse that said, in its deep and measured rhythm, I am here. I have always been here, and you too are here, and that is enough. She leaned her forehead against the tree, and the bark pressed against her skin with a firmness that was also a gentleness. The way a hand placed on a shoulder can be both anchoring and freeing. She closed her eyes, her real eyes, the eyes in the bed, in the dark room. And for a moment, she was in both places at once. The warm bark against her forehead and the soft pillow beneath her cheek. The golden light of the forest and the kindly dark of her room. The pulse of the ancient tree and the pulse of her own steady heart. And the two pulses synchronized, and she sank, not fell, not dropped, sank the way a stone sinks in still water, with grace and without struggle, surrendered to the element that holds it, finding its place not at the surface where the light is bright and the world is loud, but at the bottom where the water is quieter and the light is softer, and everything moves more slowly, more gently, more in accordance with some deep and ancient rhythm that was here before we arrived and will be here long after we are gone. The second story found her in a place she had never been but recognized immediately. The way you recognize a song you heard as a child, even though you cannot remember when or where or who was singing it. A cottage, not a cottage from a storybook, not the quaint, picturesque kind with a thatched roof and climbing roses and smoke curling from a chimney in a perfect decorative spiral. This cottage was simpler than that, and because it was simpler, it was more real. Its walls were made of stone, the kind of stone that is gray in the rain and warm brown in the dry. And the stones were not perfectly fitted, but nestled together the way old friends sit together, comfortably, with gaps and imperfections that are not flaws, but the spaces where intimacy lives. The roof was dark, perhaps wooden, perhaps thatched with something that time had turned from green to silver, to a color that was neither but contained both. It sagged slightly in the middle, the way a face sags when it has spent a lifetime smiling. And the sag was not a sign of decay, but of endurance, of the gentle wearing that comes from being present year after year, through storm and stillness alike. A window faced her, and through it she could see light, not the golden light of the forest. This was different. This was the warm amber light of a fire that had been burning long enough to have settled into its work, no longer crackling with the exuberance of new flames, but glowing with the deep, steady warmth of coals that have found their purpose and embrace it. She moved toward the cottage again, without walking, without deciding to move, simply finding herself closer, the way a dream moves you from one scene to another without the inconvenience of transition. And the door opened before she reached it, not dramatically, not with a creak of hinges or a gust of wind. It simply opened the way a hand opens to receive something being offered. Inside, the cottage was smaller than it had appeared from outside, and warmer and quieter. walls were the same stone as the exterior. But here, close to the fire, they had taken on a richness of color that made them look like the walls of a very old, very loved church, not grand, not imposing, but holding within their stones the accumulated warmth of 1,000 evenings like this one. The fire was in a hearth that was low and wide, built not for show, but for function, for the simple, essential purpose of holding warmth in a space where warmth was needed. Above the fire, a blackened iron pot hung from a hook, and from within it came the faintest aroma, not of any specific food, but of something simmered slowly, something that had been attended to with patience and care. Something that fed not just the body, but the idea of being fed, the comfort of knowing that nourishment was near and would be given freely. A chair sat beside the fire. It was wooden, with arms that curved outward in a way that suggested they had been shaped not by a lathe, but by the hands of someone who understood that a chair arm should not merely support the elbow, but should receive it, should curve around it the way a river curves around a stone, embracing, not containing. She sat in the chair, and the moment she did, she understood something about furniture that she had never understood before. The best chair is not the one that looks the most beautiful or costs the most money or fits most precisely with the decor of the room. The best chair is the one that, when you sit in it, makes you feel that the chair was made for you specifically, that somewhere in the process of its making, in the selecting of the wood, in the shaping of the arms, in the placing of the legs, someone, perhaps without knowing it, was thinking of the particular shape of your body and the particular way you like to sit and the particular kind of tiredness you carry home with you at the end of a day. This chair knew her, and she let it know her. The fire crackled, softly, politely, the way a person clears their throat, not to demand attention, but simply to remind you that they are present and at ease. A log shifted, sending a small shower of sparks upward, and she watched them rise and fade, each one a brief and perfect punctuation mark in the sentence the fire was writing. A sentence that had no subject and no verb, only warmth, only light, only the gentle, persistent assertion that here, in this moment, in this small circle of glow, everything is as it should be. On the wall beside the fire, a shelf held a few objects. A clay mug, its rim darkened by years of lips pressing against it. A small glass jar filled with something that might have been honey, its color deepening toward amber where the light from the fire touched it. A book, just one, its cover worn to a uniform gray-brown, its title no longer legible, its pages swollen with humidity and use into a texture that was less like paper and more like fabric, like the fabric of something that has been handled so often and so lovingly that it has become less an object and more an extension of the hands that hold it. She did not reach for the book. She did not need to. Its presence was enough. The presence of a story that had been read so many times that the reading had become a ritual, and the ritual had become a prayer, and the prayer had become a kind of breathing, in and out, in and out, the same words returning again and again, not because they contained new information, but because their repetition was itself a form of rest, a way of telling the mind that it did not need to discover anything new, did not need to solve anything unsolved, did not need to be anything other than what it already was. She closed her eyes, or the version of her in the cottage closed her eyes, which was the same thing, because by now the boundary between the woman in the bed and the woman in the chair had become so thin as to be imaginary, a membrane no thicker than a thought, and thoughts, she was learning, are thinner than we think. And she listened. The fire spoke. It spoke in the language of combustion, in the vocabulary of hiss and pop and settle, in the grammar of ember and ash and rising heat. It told a story that had no plot and no characters and no conflict, because the fire had resolved all its conflicts long ago, had burned through its own drama in the first fierce minutes of its life, and was now in the contemplative phase, the phase where all that remains is the essential truth. That warmth is enough. That light given freely is the only kind of light that lasts. That the simplest purpose, to burn, to warm, to be, is also the most profound. Outside the cottage, she could hear the wind, not a howling wind, not a wind that rattled the shutters or tested the doors. This wind moved through the landscape the way a sigh moves through a body, slowly, completely, releasing something that had been held too long. It passed over the roof of the cottage, and she could hear its passage, a long, low murmur that rose and fell like breathing, like the breathing of something enormous and benevolent that held the world in its arms and was rocking it slowly toward sleep. And she rocked with it, in the chair, in the cottage, in the bed, in the dark room. She rocked with the wind's rhythm and the fire's rhythm and the rhythm of her own heart. And the three rhythms were not three, but one. A single, slow, deep pulse that moved through her like a warm current, loosening the knots she had tied in herself during the day, undoing the tensions she had wound so tightly that she had forgotten they were not natural, reminding her that the body's natural state is not tension, but ease, not readiness, but rest, not vigilance, but trust. The air in the cottage was warm and still, and it carried a scent that she could not name, but that she recognized with every cell of her being. It was the scent of safety, not the safety of locked doors and alarm systems, but the older safety, the deeper safety, the safety that exists when you are in a place where nothing is asked of you and nothing is expected of you, and nothing will happen to you that you do not want to happen. A place where the world, for one small and precious interval, stops demanding and starts simply being, and allows you to do the same. She sank deeper into the chair. The arms received her. The fire warmed her. The wind sang to her. And the silence, the deep, full, alive silence of the cottage, held her the way water holds a floating leaf, without grasping, without constraining, but with a completeness that made the floating feel not like drifting, but like belonging. The third story began with a sound, a bell, not the sharp, urgent ringing of a telephone or an alarm, not the commanding peal of a church bell calling the faithful to attention. This was a different kind of bell, a small one, a single one, struck with a soft mallet, so that its sound was not a clang, but a tone, a pure, clear, unwavering tone that hung in the air the way a single note of a tuning fork hangs, perfectly itself, needing no harmony, needing no accompaniment, complete in its simplicity. The tone faded, and in the space where it had been, there was a garden. This garden was not like any garden she had seen in the waking world. There were no neat rows, no labeled plants, no sense of organization or design. And yet, and this was the paradox that the garden offered with every glance, every breath, it was not wild. It existed in a third space, a space between cultivation and wilderness, a space that human language does not have a word for, but that the heart recognizes instantly, because the heart has always lived in this space, this place between what is made and what grows, between what is chosen and what simply arrives. The flowers in this garden were not the bright, showy flowers of florists and garden centers. They were quieter than that. Their colors were muted, the soft purple of lilacs just before they fall, the pale, almost white yellow of primroses that grow in shade, the dusty rows of old-fashioned sweet peas that have been bred not for size or longevity, but for scent. And their scent was the most extraordinary thing about them. It did not arrive all at once, the way perfume arrives when you spray it. It drifted. It wandered toward her the way a cat wanders toward a person it has decided to trust. Slowly, indirectly, with pauses and detours, as though giving her time to prepare for the gift it was about to give. And when it reached her, it was not one scent, but many, layered the way colors are layered in a watercolor painting, each one transparent, each one allowing the others to show through. There was the honey sweetness of honeysuckle, and beneath it, the cool green of crushed mint, and beneath that the darker, earthier note of soil after rain, and beneath that something she could not name, something that was perhaps not a scent at all but a feeling, the feeling of being small and safe in a world that is large and kind. She stood in the garden, and the garden stood around her, and between them there was an exchange that happened without movement, without sound, without thought. The garden gave her its calm, and she gave it her attention, and the exchange was equal and complete, and both were richer for it. A path led through the garden, not a path of stone or gravel, but a path of pressed earth and low-growing thyme, so that each step released a small burst of fragrance, a whispered here, 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 as though the ground itself were marking her passage with tiny, scent-filled breadcrumbs. She followed the path without urgency, and the path rewarded her lack of urgency with details that would have been invisible to someone moving faster. A dewdrop on a rose petal, holding within it an inverted image of the garden, a world turned inside out and made more beautiful by the turning. A ladybug on a leaf, its red shell so polished it looked like enamel, its black spots so precise they might have been painted by the steadiest hand in the world. And the hand that painted them, she knew without knowing how she knew, was not a hand at all, but the slow, patient, unconscious artistry of life itself, which has been making beautiful things for billions of years, without once stopping to admire its own work, which is perhaps why its work is so consistently, so humblingly beautiful. A spider's web between two stems of lavender, and caught in it, not an insect, but a single thread of something that glinted in the soft light. Perhaps a strand of silk from a nearby cocoon, perhaps a thread of spider silk from another web, carried on a breeze too gentle to be felt. The thread was caught in the web, the way a thought is caught in the mind, lightly, almost accidentally, and with no sense of entrapment, only a quiet, temporary resting before the next breeze comes and carries it on. She came to a clearing in the garden, and in the center of the clearing was a pool of water. It was not a large pool, perhaps the width of two outstretched arms, perhaps less. It was perfectly circular, as though cut from the earth by a tool of extraordinary precision, and its surface was still. Not the stillness of stagnation, not the heavy, dead stillness of water that has sat too long in a closed container, but the living stillness of water that is at rest by choice, that has found its level and is content with it. That is not moving, not because it cannot, but because it has no need to. She knelt beside the pool, and here, too, the ground was soft, a cushion of moss and thyme, and something that might have been clover, each leaf pressing against her skin with a gentleness that was almost reverent, as though the garden were honoring her decision to kneel, to lower herself, to bring her face closer to the earth that had grown all of this beauty without being asked. She looked into the pool, and the pool looked into her. Its surface was a mirror, but not the kind of mirror that shows you what you look like. This mirror showed her what she felt like, and what she felt like in this moment, in this garden, in this clearing beside this still and perfect pool, was something for which she had no word. It was not happiness, because happiness implies a contrast with sadness. And here there was no contrast, no opposite, no shadow. It was not peace, because peace implies the absence of conflict. And here there was no conflict to be absent from. It was not even calm, because calm implies a previous state of agitation that has been calmed. It was simply this moment, this breath, this soft ground beneath her knees, and this still water before her eyes, and this scent in her nostrils, and this silence in her ears. This, only this. And this was enough, more than enough. This was everything. A flower grew at the edge of the pool. She had not noticed it before. It was so small, so modest in its beauty, that it had been hidden in plain sight, the way the most important things often are. Its petals were the palest possible blue, a blue that was almost white, a blue that seemed to exist not as a color, but as a suggestion of a color, a memory of a color that had been diluted by so many dawns and dusks that only its essence remained. And in the center of the flower, a single drop of nectar caught the light and held it. A tiny, golden, living jewel that pulsed with a warmth that was not thermal but emotional. If such a distinction could be made in a place like this, where the boundaries between the physical and the felt had become as thin and permeable as the boundary between sleeping and waking, she leaned closer to the flower, and the flower leaned closer to her. And in the space between them, a space no wider than a breath, something passed. Not a message, not a lesson, not a revelation. Something smaller than all of those and larger than all of those. Something that, if she had tried to hold it with words, would have slipped through the net of language like water through a sieve. But she did not try to hold it. She let it pass through her, the way the garden's scent had passed through her, the way the fire's warmth had passed through her, the way way the stream's sound had passed through her, not grasping, not possessing, but receiving, and in receiving, being changed, and in being changed, being softened, and in being softened, being opened, and in being opened, being ready. Ready for what? Ready for nothing. Ready for everything. Ready for sleep. The fourth story was the shortest and the simplest, because by now she was so close to sleep that the stories themselves had begun to change, had begun to lose their edges and their details, had begun to dissolve from narratives into sensations, from scenes into feelings, from words into the silence that exists beneath all words and gives them whatever meaning they have. She was on a hill. The hill was not high, not a mountain, not even a large hill, but from its gentle summit, she could see the land spreading out below her like a map drawn by a hand that valued beauty over accuracy. The land was soft. Everything was soft. The fields were soft, their grasses bent in a wind she could see, but not feel, each blade moving in its own small dance, independent of its neighbors, yet harmonious with them. The way instruments in an orchestra play different notes, yet create a single, unified sound. The trees were soft, their canopies rounded by years of wind into shapes that were not the sharp triangles of young trees, but the full, generous curves of maturity, the kind of curves that speak not of decline, but of arrival, of a shape finally becoming what it was always meant to be. The sky above the hill was the color of twilight, not the dramatic twilight of sunset, with its oranges and reds and purples, but the quiet twilight that comes after the drama is over, when the sky has settled into a deep, velvety blue-gray that is not quite night and not quite day, but something in between, something that belongs entirely to itself and to no other time. A few stars were visible, not the bright, assertive stars of deep night, but the shy, tentative stars of early evening, the ones that appear one by one, as though testing whether the sky is dark enough to receive them, blinking into existence like small, quiet thoughts arriving in a mind that is slowly letting go of the day. She lay on the hill. The grass beneath her was long enough to be a mattress and short enough to be smooth, and it cradled her body the way the chair had cradled her, the way the moss had cradled her, the way the bed cradled her, with that same quality of receiving without possessing, of holding without gripping, of supporting without demanding anything in return. The air on the hill was cool, but not cold, and it moved across her skin with the lightness of a touch so gentle it might have been imagined, except that she could feel it, could feel the way it lifted the fine hairs on her arms and then settled them again, could feel the way it carried the scent of distant grass and nearer earth, and something that was, she thought, or she imagined, or she remembered, the scent of the sea, though the sea was nowhere in sight, unless the sea was everywhere, unless the sea was not a place, but a presence, a memory stored in the air itself, a ghost of salt and depth and endless, unhurried movement. She breathed, and the hill breathed with her, and the sky breathed with her, and the stars breathed with her, and everything that was in this moment on this hill, in this twilight, breathed with her, and the breathing was one breathing, and the one breathing was enough. Above her, the stars continued to appear, one, then another, each one a small, steady point of light in the deepening dark, each one a reminder that the universe is vast and that she was a part of it, and that being a part of something vast does not make you small, but makes you connected, and being connected does not make you responsible, but makes you held, and being held does not mean you cannot move, but means that when you rest, there is something beneath you that will not let you fall. A sound came from somewhere far away. A bell, perhaps, or a horn, or the cry of a bird she would never be able to name. It was faint, so faint that it might have been a sound she was remembering rather than a sound she was hearing. And it lasted only a moment. A single, pure note that rose and then fell and then was gone, absorbed by the vast and accepting silence of the evening. And the silence that followed the sound was deeper than the silence that had preceded it. The way the silence after a piece of music is deeper than the silence before it, because it contains within it not just the absence of sound, but the presence of something that the sound has left behind. A resonance, a warmth, a feeling that something has been completed, that something has been said that needed to be said, and now the saying is over. And what remains is the quiet that holds the echo of the saying, the way a hand holds the warmth of another hand after the other hand has let go. Shall she let go? Not all at once, not with a gesture or a decision, but slowly, gently, the way a cloud lets go of its rain, not dramatically, not all in one downpour, but drop by drop, each drop released when it is ready to be released, each drop falling when it is time to fall. The way sleep falls when it falls, not as an event, but as a process, a gradual surrender of the edges, a softening of the boundaries between self and world, a loosening of the grip that the waking mind maintains for reasons it has forgotten, on a self that it no longer needs to maintain. Her thoughts became lighter. They had been heavy. She could feel that now, in retrospect, the way you feel the weight of a bag only after you have set it down. They had been dense and tangled, these thoughts, knotted together with anxiety and anticipation, and the peculiar modern disease of feeling that you should be doing something, always something. That stillness is a form of failure, and that rest must be earned through productivity, and that the present moment is a doorway to the next moment, rather than a room in which you are allowed to sit and stay. But now the thoughts were loosening. One by one, they unknotted themselves, not through effort, but through the simple, gravitational pull of exhaustion finally being allowed to do its work. A thought about tomorrow drifted upward and dissolved. A thought about yesterday drifted upward and dissolved. A thought about the way she had said the wrong thing, or the right thing at the wrong time, or the right thing at the right time to the wrong person. It drifted upward and it dissolved. A thought about the email she had not sent, the bill she had not paid, the call she had not returned. It drifted upward and it dissolved. And in its dissolution, it became not nothing but something smaller and quieter and less burdensome. Became not a problem but a memory. Became not a weight but a leaf. And the leaf drifted upward and it dissolved, and the sky received it. And the sky did not judge it, and the sky did not keep it, and the sky let it go, the way the sky lets everything go, the way the sky holds nothing, the way the sky is always empty and full at the same time. Her body followed her mind. The small tensions she had been holding in her shoulders, in her jaw, in the muscles around her eyes, in the places where the body stores the mind's reluctance to rest. These tensions loosened one by one, like knots being untied by fingers that knew exactly where to pull and exactly how gently to pull. Fingers that were not fingers, but the simple, irresistible force of a body that has been asking for sleep for hours and has finally been given permission to receive it. Her breathing deepened, not the deep breathing of effort, of trying to relax, of the conscious and slightly anxious pursuit of calm, but the deep breathing of genuine rest, the breathing that comes when the mind stops directing the body and allows the body to breathe as it breathes when no one is watching. Slowly, evenly, with a rhythm that is not mathematical but organic, that rises and falls the way the land rises and falls, the way the tide rises and falls, the way everything that is alive and at rest rises and falls, in and out, in and out, a rhythm so old and so fundamental that it predates the lungs that perform it and the mind that notices it and the words that describe it. She was on the hill. She was in the cottage. She was in the forest. She was in the garden. She was in the bed, in the dark room, with the soft blanket pulled to her chin, and the lavender scent on the nightstand, and the sound of the house settling around her like a family settling into sleep, each creak a good night, each groan a sigh, each silence a shared agreement that the day is done and the night is here and the night is kind, and the night was kind. The night wrapped around her the way darkness wraps around a candle flame, not to extinguish, but to protect, to create a space where the light can be itself without competition, without comparison, without the exhausting effort of shining against the brightness of day. In the darkness, she did not need to be bright. She did not need to be anything at all. She could simply be a warmth, a presence, a breathing, a small and precious life resting in a small and quiet room in a small and sleeping house in a small and turning world in a vast and star-filled universe that asked nothing of her except that she rest and that she dream and that she wake when the time came, not with a start, but with a slow surfacing, the way a bubble rises through still water, gently, gracefully, without urgency, arriving at the surface not because it has rushed, but because it has risen. And rising is what bubbles do, and resting is what bodies do, and the night is long, and the night is kind, and the night is here. And now the stories softened further, and the images began to blur at their edges, and the narratives, if they could still be called narratives, became less like stories and more like waves, each one rising and falling with a slowness that made time itself seem to thicken, to become viscous, to move the way honey moves when it is cold, not stopping, never stopping, but moving so slowly that the movement is almost invisible, almost imaginary, almost a trick of the light, except that it is not a trick. It is real. It is the movement of time doing what time does when we stop trying to measure it and simply allow it to pass. She saw or felt or imagined a shore, a beach at night, the sand cool and fine beneath her. She was lying down again, or she had never stood up, and the sea before her, vast and dark, moving in a rhythm so slow and so regular that it was indistinguishable from stillness, each wave arriving with the unhurried certainty of something that has been doing this for millennia and will continue doing it for millennia more. Each wave a breath drawn in and released, each retreat a sigh, each advance a whisper, the sea saying the same thing it has always said, in the same voice it has always used, a voice that is not a voice but a sound that is not a sound but a feeling that is not a feeling but a truth. And the truth is this: you are held. You are held by the sand beneath you and the air above you and the water before you and the dark around you and the silence within you. And the holding is not a holding still. You may move, you may shift, you may turn in your sleep and find a new position. But the holding is a holding safe, a holding that says, without words, without conditions, without expiry, you are here, and here is safe, and safe is enough, and enough is everything. The waves continued. She continued. The night continued. And the boundaries between them, between her and the waves, between the night and the dark, between the sleeping and the dreamed, between the story and the silence, continued to thin, continued to soften, continued to dissolve, until there was no longer a her who was listening to a story, no longer a story that was being told, no longer a teller who was telling, but only a vast, warm, dark, quiet, gentle, endless, timeless, boundless, bottomless, fathomless, wordless. The fire in the cottage had burned down to its deepest glow. A bed of embers so warm, so still that they seemed not to be burning at all, but simply to be warm, as though warmth were not a process, but a state, as though heat were not something produced, but something simply present, the way presence is present, the way peace is present when peace is allowed to be present. The stream in the forest continued to move over its stones, each stone worn a little smoother, a little rounder, a little more perfectly itself by the patient, ceaseless, gentle passage of water that asked nothing of the stones except that they be there. And the stones were there, and that was enough. The tree in the forest continued to pulse with its ancient, slow rhythm, and the moss continued to glow with its soft, golden light, and the ferns continued to uncurl their fronds in the slow, spiraling dance that is not a performance, but a becoming, the way all true beauty is a becoming and not an arrival. The flowers in the garden continued to breathe their scent into the air, and the pool continued to hold its stillness, and the ladybug continued to sit on its leaf, and the dewdrop continued to hold its inverted world, and the garden continued to exist in its third space, its impossible and perfect space between the made and the grown, and the space held, and the garden held, and the holding was enough. The hill continued to rise above the soft land, and the grass continued to move in its unseen wind, and the stars continued to appear, one by one, each one a small, steady, unblinking point of light in the deepening dark, each one a promise that the universe is vast, and that vastness is not loneliness, but connection, not emptiness, but fullness, not fear, but the deepest, oldest, most fundamental kind of home. And in the room, in the bed, under the blanket, on the pillow, the woman breathed in and out, slowly, deeply, evenly, without effort, without direction, without thought, just breathing, just resting just being, just this. The room held her. The darkness held her. The silence held her. The night held her. And she let herself be held. And in letting herself be held, she let herself go. And in letting herself go, she let herself fall. And in letting herself fall, she found that there was no ground to hit, no bottom to reach, no end to the falling. Only a deepening, a softening, a widening, a gentle, endless descent into the very center of rest, where rest is not the absence of wakefulness, but the presence of something else entirely, something that has no name in any language, because no language has needed to name it, because it is what exists beneath all names, beneath all words, beneath all stories, beneath all sounds. The silent, warm, dark, gentle, endless, formless, boundless, timeless. And the bell sounded once more, faint and far, a single pure tone in the vast silence. And the tone was not a beginning and not an ending, but simply a note that hung in the air the way a star hangs in the sky, alone and complete and sufficient. And the note faded, and the silence returned, and the silence was deeper now, and softer now, and warmer now. And the silence was not empty, but full of all the sounds that had come before, and all the silences that had held those sounds, and all the spaces between the sounds and the silences. And in those spaces, in those small and sacred spaces between one breath and the next, between one wave and the next, between one heartbeat and the next, there was a room, and in the room there was a bed, and in the bed there was a woman, and the woman was sleeping, and the sleeping was deep, and the deep was kind, and the kind was enough. And the night whispered one last time, with the voice of wind and water and fire and earth and starlight and silence and time, and the space between all things and the connection within all things. Rest now, and know that rest is not a reward. Rest now, and know that rest is not a retreat. Rest now, and know that rest is not a weakness. Rest now, because rest is what the world does when it turns. And the world has been turning for a very long time, and it has not yet stopped, and it will not stop tonight. And while it turns, you may close your eyes, and while it turns, you may loosen your grip, and while it turns, you may let the stories become sensations, and the sensations become feelings, and the feelings become warmth, and the warmth become darkness, and the darkness become the softest, safest, gentlest, most welcoming thing you have ever known, and you may sink into it, and it will hold you, and you will hold nothing, and the holding and the not holding will be the same thing, and the same thing will be enough, and enough will be everything, and everything will be rest, and rest will be now, and now will be all there is, and all there is will be exactly what it should be, and what it should be will be this: a breath, a warmth, a darkness, a silence, a stillness, a peace, asleep, asleep, asleep. And she slept, and the world turned, and the night held her, the way the sea holds the moon's reflection, not grasping, not possessing, but cradling gently in its vast and dark and restless and restful and endless and kind and kind and kind embrace. And the hours passed the way hours pass in sleep, not passing at all, but deepening, the way a color deepens when the light around it dims, becoming more itself, more rich, more true, until the hours were not hours at all, but simply a duration of warmth, a length of peace, a width of silence, a depth of rest that had no measurement and needed none, because the things that matter most, the warmth of a blanket, the softness of a pillow, the stillness of a room, the quietness of a mind that has finally stopped reaching. These things do not need to be measured to be known, and they do not need to be known to be real. and they do not need to be real to be felt. And they are felt now, in this moment, in this breath, in this darkness, in this sleep. And the feeling is enough, and the enough is everything, and everything is asleep. And still the night whispers, for those who are not yet ready to close their eyes, for those who need a little more time, a little more gentle persuasion, a few more moments of soft and quiet company before the final surrender. A rain begins to fall, not on the hill, not in the garden, not in the forest, not in the cottage, or perhaps in all of these places at once. Because in the country of sleep, all places are one place, and all times are one time, and all weathers are one weather, and the one weather is the weather of peace. The rain falls softly. It falls the way dust falls in a beam of light, slowly, driftingly, with no urgency and no destination, simply falling because falling is what rain does. The way rising is what warmth does. The way settling is what sleep does. Each raindrop is small, impossibly small, small enough to be almost imaginary. And yet each one carries within it a sound, a tiny, delicate sound, a sound that is not a plop or a splash or a patter, but something finer than all of those, something closer to a whisper, something closer to a sigh, something that, if you listen very carefully, if you quiet your mind very completely, if you soften your grip very gently, sounds almost like a name, your name, being spoken not by a voice, but by the rain itself, which knows your name not because you told it, but because the rain knows everything that the earth knows, and the earth knows everything that has ever rested upon it, and you have rested upon it, and your resting has been noted, and your resting has been welcomed, and your resting is wanted, and your resting is here. The rain falls on the roof of the cottage, and the sound it makes is the sound of 1,000 tiny fingers drumming very, very softly on a surface that receives each touch with a muted, warm, wooden response. A sound that is not noise, but texture. A texture that is not rough, but smooth. A smoothness that is not cold, but warm. A warmth that is not fire, but comfort. A comfort that is not physical, but emotional. An emotion that is not happiness, but something deeper. Something that happiness rests upon the way. A house rests upon its foundation. Unseen, unsung, essential. The rain falls on the leaves of the forest, and each leaf receives each drop with a small, private sound. A sound that might be a greeting, or might be a farewell, or might be neither. Might simply be the sound of water meeting leaf, which is one of the oldest sounds in the world. A sound that was here before ears were here to hear it, and will be here after ears are gone. A sound that does not need to be heard to be beautiful, that is beautiful in the same way that a tree falling in an empty forest is beautiful, because beauty does not require a witness, because beauty is not in the seeing, but in the being. And the being of rain on leaves is beautiful, and the being of you in your bed is beautiful, and the being of the night around you is beautiful, and the being of the sleep that is coming toward you like a tide is beautiful, and beauty is enough, and enough is everything, and everything is sleep, and sleep is here, and here is where you are, and where you are is safe, and safe is all you need, and all you need is given, and given freely, and freely given, and given. The rain falls on the pool in the garden, and each drop creates a circle, a perfect, expanding circle of ripples that moves outward from the point of impact with a slowness that is almost hypnotic, a slowness that draws the eye and then releases it, draws it and releases it. The way breathing draws the mind and releases it. The way a heartbeat draws the attention and releases it. The way sleep draws the consciousness and releases it, not once, but again and again. Each circle a suggestion of letting go. Each ripple a small lesson in the art of expansion, of widening, of allowing the self to become less defined and more diffuse, less sharp and more soft, less bounded and more open, until the self is not a self at all, but a series of ripples moving outward into a still pool, becoming larger and larger and fainter and fainter, until they merge with the stillness and become indistinguishable from it. And the distinction between the ripple and the pool is no longer a distinction, but a unity. And the unity is not a loss, but a gain. And the gain is not of something new, but of something that was always there, always waiting, always ready to be recognized. The fundamental, bedrock, unshakable, indestructible truth that you are not separate from the rest, that you never were, that the boundary between you and the world is a convenience of language and not a reality of existence, and that in sleep this truth is not learned but remembered, not achieved but returned to, not built but uncovered, like a statue being unearthed from the sand, grain by grain, breath by breath, ripple by ripple, until the shape that was always there is visible again, whole and complete and beautiful and at peace. The rain falls, and the rain falls, and the rain falls, and she sleeps, and you sleep, and we sleep, and the world sleeps, and the rain sings us to sleep, and the silence holds us in sleep, and the darkness keeps us in sleep, and the night is long, and the night is kind, and the night is here, and here is where we are, and where we are is home, and home is not a place but a state, and the state is rest, and rest is now, and now is forever, and forever is not a length of time but a depth of peace, and the depth of peace is bottomless, and the bottomlessness is not frightening but comforting, because a thing without a bottom is a thing you can fall into forever without ever hitting, without ever stopping, without ever being hurt. And falling forever is not falling, but flying. And flying is not moving, but being. And being is not effort, but ease. And ease is what the night offers. And the offer is open open is infinite, and the infinite is here, now, always, asleep, and in the morning. But that is not yet. The morning is far away, on the other side of hours that have not yet been counted and will not be counted, because counting is the work of the waking mind, and the waking mind is at rest. And rest is where the counting stops and the being begins. And being is enough, and enough is all, and all is well. So do not think of morning. Do not think of what comes after. Do not think of clocks or alarms or obligations, or the particular shape of the day that will arrive when the day arrives, which it will in its own time, and not before, and not because you worried about it, but because the world turns, and the turning of the world is not your responsibility, and the rising of the sun is not your task, and the unfolding of the day is not your burden, and all that is asked of you, all that has ever been asked of you, all that will ever be asked of you by the night, by the dark, by the silence, by the sleep that is reaching for you with the gentlest of hands and the softest of touches and the warmest of embraces, is this: let go of the day that is finished. It is finished. It cannot be changed, and it does not need to be changed, because it is done. And what is done is done. And what is done is enough. And enough is complete. And complete is whole. And whole is perfect in the way that only things that include their own imperfections can be perfect. Let go of the night that is beginning. It does not need to be managed. It does not need to be used wisely. It does not need to be filled with the right kind of rest, or the right kind of sleep, or the right kind of dreams. It simply needs to be entered the way you enter a warm bath, not with a plan, not with a strategy, but with a surrender, a giving over of the body to the water and the water to the body, until the two are one, and the one is warm, and the warm is all. Let go of yourself, not forever, not in a way that frightens, but for now, for this night, for these hours that belong not to the day world of doing and achieving and becoming, but to the night world of resting and being and simply, quietly, gently, softly, warmly, darkly, silently being. Let go of the self that has tasks. Let go of the self that has worries. Let go of the self that has a name and a history and a future. Let all of that go for now, the way you let go of a stone you have been carrying, not by throwing it, but by opening your hand. And the hand opens, and the stone falls, and the falling is easy, and the ease is relief, and the relief is deep, and the deep is where you are going, and where you are going is where you have always been, beneath the stone, beneath the weight, beneath the effort, beneath the noise, in the deep, quiet, warm, dark, still, gentle, kind center of yourself, which is not a center at all but an openness, not a point but a space, not a thing but a place, and the place is here, and here is home, and home is where the sleep is, and the sleep is where you are, and you are sleeping, and the rain continues, softly, softly, and the fire continues, warmly, warmly, and the stream continues, gently, gently, and the stars continue, steadily, steadily, and the night continues, kindly, kindly, and you continue, breathingly, breathingly, in and out, in and out, slower now, it's deeper now, it's quieter now, it's softer now, it's closer now, it's closer, it's closer, it's there you are, there you rest, there you sleep, and the stories end, not with a conclusion, but with a fading, not with a period, but with an ellipsis, not with a closing door, but with an open window through which the night air continues to move, carrying with it the scent of rain and lavender and earth, and all the quiet, unnamed, unremarkable, extraordinary things that fill the world when the world is allowed to be itself, without decoration, without performance, without apology. Asleep, asleep, asleep. And no, not with the mind, but with the body. Not with the thought, but with the breath. Not with the knowing, but with the being that you are loved by the night and held by the dark and kept by the silence and warmed by the stillness, and that these things, love and holding and keeping and warming, are not things that need to be earned or deserved or proven or justified. They are given freely, unconditionally, endlessly, the way rain is given, the way starlight is given, the way sleep is given, not as a gift that must be repaid, but as a grace that simply is, that was here before you arrived and will be here after you leave and is here now for you, and only for you in this moment, in this breath, in this darkness, in this sleep, in this. Good night, good night, good night. The room had become a world of its own by now. A small, enclosed universe where the only geography was the shape of the blanket over her body, and the only weather was the warmth trapped between the sheets, and the only time was the slow, elastic time of a mind releasing its grip on wakefulness. She had turned in her sleep, not a restless turning, but a settling turning, the way a bird settles its wings, adjusting not from discomfort, but from a deepening of comfort, finding that new position which is not better than the old one, but simply different. And the difference is enough to allow the body to sink 1 degree further into the mattress, 1 degree further into the darkness, 1 degree further into the great, soft, warm, bottomless lake of sleep that waited beneath her like an ocean waited beneath a boat, patient and vast and unconcerned with the boat's readiness to arrive. And in that turning, in that small and unconscious repositioning of limbs and resettling of weight, a new landscape opened before her, or within her, or around her, because by now the distinction between inner and outer had become meaningless, had become a line drawn on water, had become a word without a referent, a sound without a source, a thought without a thinker. She was underground, not buried, not trapped, not in the way that underground implies in the waking world, not in the way of cellars and crypts and confined spaces. This was a different kind of underground. This was the underground that exists beneath the forest, beneath the garden, beneath the hill, beneath the shore, the deep, loamy, mineral-scented underground where roots grow and water moves, and the slow, patient alchemy of the earth turns fallen, leaves into the dark, rich soil from which new leaves will grow. In a cycle so ancient and so reliable that it has become not a cycle, but a constant, not a process, but a state, not a change, but a continuity that contains within it all changes, all seasons, all endings and beginnings, folded into one another like the layers of an infinite cake, each layer sweet and distinct and inseparable from the others. The light here was different from any light she had known. It was not golden like the light of the forest. It was not amber like the light of the cottage fire. It was not silver blue like the light of twilight on the hill. This light was the color of nothing, or rather, it was the color of the idea of color, a faint luminescence that seemed to come from the earth itself, from the minerals in the soil, from the slow chemical conversations happening between root and stone and water drop and clay particle. Conversations that had been going on for millions of years and would continue for millions more. Conversations so quiet that no microphone could detect them, and so constant that they amounted not to sound, but to a hum, a vibration, a tremor in the fabric of the underground that was not heard with the ears, but felt with the bones, with the marrow, with the deep ancestral part of the self that remembers, though it cannot say how it remembers, or what it remembers, or why. That once, long before there were eyes to see or ears to hear or minds to worry, there was only this: the earth and the darkness, and the slow, warm, patient turning of matter into life and life into matter, over and over and over, without beginning, without end, without anxiety, without plan, without any of the frenetic, purposeful, achievement-oriented energy that the world above the ground had learned to call progress. She moved through this underground, or she was moved through it, which was the more accurate description, because movement here was not willed, but allowed, not directed, but received, not chosen, but accepted. The way a seed accepts the movement of water through its hull, not deciding to absorb, but simply being absorbent, simply being open, simply being the kind of thing that water moves through when water is looking for somewhere to go. The roots were everywhere. They hung from the ceiling of this underground world like the roots of a banyan tree hang in a tropical forest, except that here there was no ceiling. Or rather, the ceiling was the ground above, the ground that she had walked on in the forest and knelt on in the garden and lain on the hill. And seeing it from below was like seeing the sky from beneath the water, an inversion that was not disorienting, but illuminating, that revealed something about the nature of ground and sky, and up and down, that she had always known, but never consciously thought, that they are not opposites, but partners, not adversaries, but complements, and that the ground is as much a sky for the roots as the sky is a ground for the birds, and that everything depends on your perspective, and that perspective in sleep becomes as soft and as malleable as clay, and can be reshaped gently into forms that the waking mind would never allow. But the sleeping mind welcomes with open arms and open hands and open heart. The roots were beautiful. This surprised her, not because roots are not beautiful, but because she had never thought to look. They were pale in the underground light, pale and smooth and tapering, each one a finger of the earth reaching downward with a curiosity that was not intellectual but physical, a curiosity made of cellulose and capillary action, and the blind, brave, unhesitating impulse to grow toward what nourishes. Some of the roots were thin as thread, hair thin, barely visible, and they moved, or seemed to move, with a quivering sensitivity that was almost nervous, almost alive in the way that an antenna is alive, receiving signals from a world too subtle for larger organs to detect. Other roots were thicker, as thick as her wrist, as thick as her arm, and they moved more slowly, with a gravity and a dignity that comes from age and size, and the quiet confidence of something that has been growing toward the center of the earth for decades, and will continue growing for decades more, unhurried, undisturbed, undaunted by the darkness that it has long since stopped noticing, because it has become part of the darkness, and the darkness has become part of it. As she reached out and touched one of the thicker roots, it was warm, not the warmth of blood, not the warmth of fire, but the warmth of the earth itself, a steady, low, constant warmth that does not fluctuate with the weather or the time of day, that is not affected by the passing of clouds or the changing of seasons, that simply is the way a rock simply is, the way the center of the earth simply is, a warmth that has nothing to do with the sun and everything to do with the sheer, dumb, miraculous fact of matter being matter, of atoms vibrating in their slow and ancient dance, of the physical world being alive in a way that the word alive is not large enough to contain. The root was smooth beneath her fingers, smoother than she had expected, and it had a give to it, not soft exactly, but yielding, the way a firm cushion yields, the way a tense muscle yields when it is finally massaged, the way a closed mind yields when it is finally quiet enough to hear something it has been refusing to hear. She pressed her palm against it, and she could feel deep within the root a movement, not a physical movement, but a movement of something else, something that was not sap and was not water and was not cellular activity, but was perhaps all of these things and perhaps none of them. A movement that was more like a current than a flow, more like a tide than a river, more like a breathing than a pumping, a slow, rhythmic pulse that moved through the root the way a thought moves through a mind, not in a straight line but in waves, waves that rose and fell and rose again, each one carrying something: nourishment, information, intention, desire, from the farthest tip of the root, where it touched the deep, damp earth, back to the tree above, the tree she could not see but could feel the way you feel a person in the next room, not with any of the five senses, but with that sixth sense that is not a sense at all but a knowing that is not rational but is nonetheless true. So she pressed her ear against the root, and she heard not words, not music, not any sound that the waking mind would recognize as sound. What she heard was the sound of growing, the actual, literal, physical sound of a root extending itself through the soil, cell by cell, millimeter by millimeter. A sound so faint that it would be inaudible in the world above, in the world of wind and water and human voices, and all the other loud, insistent, demanding sounds that fill the air during the day. But here, in the underground, where the silence was so complete that it had become not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else, a receptivity, an openness, a listening so total that it could hear the sound of a single cell dividing, of a single root hair stretching, of a single water molecule being drawn from the soil into the plant's body, with a thirst so gentle it was almost indistinguishable from love. She listened, and the root spoke, not in language but in pulse, not in words but in rhythm. And the rhythm said what all great voices say when they are stripped of their words and reduced to their essence. I am here. I have always been here. I am growing, and my growing is slow, and my slowness is not a limitation but a wisdom. And my wisdom is this, that the deepest changes happen below the surface, in the dark, in the quiet, in the places where no one is watching and no one is applauding and no one is measuring. And that what is built in the dark is stronger than what is built in the light, because the dark does not distract and the quiet does not interrupt and the slow does not exhaust. And the root that grows slowly through the dark earth is the root that holds the tree through the storm. And the storm will come, and the root will hold. And the holding is not effort, but nature. And nature is not cruel, but kind. And kind is what the underground is. And what the underground is, you are now, in this moment, in this sleep, rooted, grounded, held, held, held. She let go of the root, or the root let go of her, or there was no letting go, because there had been no holding, only a touching, and the touching had changed her, and the changing had softened her, and the softening had deepened her, and the deepening had brought her closer to something that she could not see and could not name, but could feel with every fiber of her being, every cell of her body, every thread of the web that connected her to the root, and the root to the tree, and the tree to the forest, and the forest to the earth, and the earth to the turning world, and the turning world to the silent, star-filled, endless, boundless, fathomless, bottomless, sleep-dark universe that held it all in the palm of its invisible hand and whispered, as it had always whispered, as it would always whisper, to every root and every leaf and every wave and every wind and every sleeping woman in every dark room, in every sleeping house, in every sleeping town, in every sleeping country, on every sleeping continent on this small, blue, spinning, miraculous, ordinary, extraordinary, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful world. Rest, you are part of me, and I do not ask the parts of me to perform. I ask only that they be, and being is what you are doing now. And the doing of being is the easiest thing in the world because it is not a doing at all. It is an allowing, and allowing is what the underground does. And the underground is where you are, and where you are is safe, and safe is enough, and enough is everything, and everything is sleep, and sleep is now, and now is. The fifth landscape came to her with the quality of a memory. Not her memory, not anyone's memory, but the memory of the earth itself. The deep geological memory that is stored not in brains, but in stone, not in synapses, but in strata, not in years, but in epochs. A memory so vast that it makes human memory look like a drop of water beside the sea. And yet, a memory that is, in its essentials, not different from the memory that lives in her own body. The memory of how to breathe, how to digest, how to heal, how to sleep. A desert, not a harsh desert, not the desert of postcards and documentaries with its blinding sun and its cracked earth and its stark, unforgiving beauty that admires from a distance but does not welcome closeness. This desert was a night desert, and the night had transformed it. The heat of the day, which she could feel in the sand beneath her, a stored warmth, a banked warmth, a warmth that had been gathered during the hours of sun and was now being released slowly, gently into the cool night air, was not oppressive but comforting, the way the warmth of a recently vacated chair is comforting, the way the warmth of a letter just pulled from an envelope is comforting, the way any warmth that has been held and then released is comforting, because released warmth carries with it the tenderness of the releasing, the sense that something has been kept safe and is now being offered freely. The sand was fine, impossibly fine. It was not the coarse, gritty sand of beaches, but the powdered, sifted, almost liquid sand of deserts, the kind of sand that flows through your fingers like water, that takes the shape of whatever contains it, that smooths itself into dunes so perfect they might have been sculpted by an artist whose only tool was patience and whose only material was time. She lay on a dune. Had she been lying down this whole time? It seemed so. It seemed that in this country of sleep, she was always lying down, always reclined, always in the posture of rest, as though the act of lying down were not a prelude to sleep, but its very essence, as though the horizontal body were a different kind of body than the vertical one, softer and more open and more receptive, a body that has set aside the business of standing and walking and doing, and has entered instead the quiet ministry of receiving. The dune held her. The sand conformed to her shape with a precision that no mattress could match, filling every hollow, supporting every curve, cradling every angle of her body with a million tiny grains, each one a point of contact, each point of contact a small act of support, and the accumulation of these small acts, a million, a billion, an uncountable multitude, created a surface that was not hard and not soft, but something in between, something that had no name in the language of furniture or bedding, but that the body recognized instantly and welcomed completely, because the body, unlike the mind, does not need words to know what it likes. The body knows. The body has always known. And what the body knows in this moment, lying on this dune in this desert under this sky, is that it is held, and that the holding is perfect, and that the perfection is not a standard to be met, but a gift to be received. And the receiving is happening now, and the now is all there is, and the all there is enough. The sky above the desert was the most extraordinary sky she had ever seen. It was not the sky of the forest, hidden by canopy. It was not the sky of the cottage, obscured by roof. It was not the sky of the hill, softened by twilight. This sky was open, completely, utterly, magnificently open, and it was filled with stars, not dozens of stars, hundreds, not thousands, millions, billions, an uncountable, unfathomable, staggering multitude of stars, each one a point of light, each point of light a sun, each sun possibly surrounded by planets, each planet possibly harboring life, each life possibly looking up at its own sky and seeing its own stars and wondering, as she was wondering now, whether anyone else was looking back. But the wonder did not disturb her. In the waking world, such thoughts could be overwhelming. The sheer scale of the universe pressing down on the mind with a weight that could feel like insignificance, like smallness, like the crushing realization of how little we matter in the grand scheme of things. But here, lying on this dune, held by this sand, warmed by this stored heat, the scale of the universe did not make her feel small. It made her feel connected. It made her feel like a single grain of sand on a single dune, in a single desert, on a single planet, in a single solar system, in a single galaxy, in a universe full of galaxies. And that being a single grain was not a diminishment, but an honor, because every grain matters to the dune, and every dune matters to the desert, and every desert matters to the planet, and every planet matters to the solar system, and every solar system matters to the galaxy, and every galaxy matters to the universe, and the universe matters to what? To itself, to the vast, unnamed, unknowable whatever it is that contains the universe the way the universe contains the stars, and the stars contain the light, and the light contains the warmth, and the warmth contains the comfort, and the comfort contains the sleep, and the sleep contains her, now completely, like a hand contains a stone that has been carried for so long that the hand has forgotten it is carrying, and the stone has forgotten it is being carried, and the two have become one, and the one is at peace. A shooting star crossed the sky. She watched it, or rather, she received it, the way the desert receives the star's light, passively, openly, without analysis, without the need to understand what it was, or why it was, or where it was going. It was simply a line of light, brief and bright and beautiful, and then it was gone, and the sky closed over the space where it had been the way water closes over a stone that has been dropped into a still pond, seamlessly, without ripple, without residue, as though the line of light had never existed, as though beauty could appear and disappear without leaving a trace, and that this, rather than being tragic, was the very essence of beauty, its impermanence, its refusal to be held, its gift of itself to the present moment, and only the present moment, with no past and no future, no before and no after, only this flash, this streak, this instant of incandescence in the vast dark, and then the dark again. And the dark is not diminished by the absence of the light, but is, if anything, deepened by it, made more itself, made more rich. The way a silence is deepened by the sound that has just ended, the way a rest is deepened by the note that has just been played, the way sleep is deepened by the thought that has just been released. She watched the stars, or the stars watched her, or the watching went both ways, each receiving the other's light. For she, too, was giving off light. She realized, or imagined, or felt a faint, warm human light, the light of a body at rest, the light of a metabolism burning slowly and steadily in the dark, the light of 60 trillion cells, each doing their quiet, invisible, essential work. And the accumulation of all this microscopic labor was a glow, not visible to the eye, perhaps, but visible to something deeper than the eye, visible to the desert and the sand and the stars and the night, which received her light the way she received theirs, with the same openness, the same receptivity, the same lack of demand, and the exchange was perfect, and the perfection was enough, and the enough was everything, and everything was. So the wind came. It came from nowhere or from everywhere, which in a desert is the same thing. It moved across the sand with a sound that was not a howl and not a whisper, but something between the two, something that the desert had invented for itself, a sound that belonged to no other landscape and could not be transplanted into any other context without losing its essential desertness. It was the sound of sand being moved, not violently, not dramatically, but gently, a grain at a time, a dune at a time, the slow, patient, aeonal reshaping of the land by an element that never tires and never stops and never hurries. The wind does not have deadlines. The wind does not have appointments. The wind does not look at its watch and wonder if it is behind schedule. The wind simply blows, and the sand simply moves, and the dunes simply change. And the change is not progress and not decay, but simply change. And the change is beautiful, and the beauty is constant. And the constant is not static but dynamic. And the dynamic is not anxious but calm. And the calm is not the calm of inaction, but the calm of right action, of action that is so perfectly aligned with its purpose that it produces no friction, no waste, no residue, only movement, only shape, only the endless, effortless, sculptural poetry of wind and sand dancing their ancient, wordless, perfect dance. She felt the wind on her face. It was cool and dry, and it carried the scent of the desert, a scent she had no name for because she had never smelled a desert at night before. But if she had to describe it, she would say it was the scent of warmth and emptiness and distance and time, the scent of places where no one has been and no one will be, the scent of solitude that is not loneliness but completeness, the scent of space that is not absence but presence, the presence of the world without the presence of people. And the world without people is not a lesser world, but a different world. A world that exists for its own sake, and not for the sake of being used or seen or named or claimed. And in this world without people, lying on this dune under this sky with this wind on her face and this sand beneath her body and this stars above her eyes, she was not a person, but a presence, not a self, but a being, not a name, but a breath. And the reduction was not a loss, but a liberation. And the liberation was not an escape, but a return. And the return was not to something foreign, but to something familiar, something she had carried within her all along, beneath the layers of identity and role and responsibility and worry and hope and fear and all the other heavy garments that the waking self insists on wearing. Beneath all of that, at the very center, at the very core, at the very heart of the matter, there it was, the bare, unadorned, unnamed, unclaimed, free, wild, peaceful, sleeping self. And the sleeping self was not different from the waking self, but was the waking self with the extras removed. The way a sculpture is a block of marble with the unnecessary parts taken away, and the removal is not a violence, but a revelation. And the revelation is not a surprise, but a remembering. And the remembering is here, now, always, asleep. The sixth story was the story of a library, but it was not a library as the waking world understands libraries. There were no shelves. There were no books. There were no reading tables or chairs or librarians shushing patrons or card catalogs or due dates or late fees. This library existed in a space that was not a space, in a building that was not a building, in a structure that had no walls and no ceiling and no floor, and yet contained within its boundless, formless, luminous interior every story that had ever been told, and every story that had ever been felt, and every story that had ever been dreamed, and every story that had never been told or felt or dreamed, but existed nonetheless, in potential, in possibility, in the vast, unexplored territory of what might yet be. The light in this library was the color of old paper, the brittle, yellowed paper of forgotten documents, but the warm, cream-colored paper of beloved books, the kind of paper that has been handled so many times and loved so thoroughly that it has developed a patina, a softness, a quality of having been not just read but lived, and the living has made it more beautiful, not less. She floated in this library. There was no other word for it. She did not walk. She did not stand. She simply was, suspended in the warm, paper-colored light, surrounded by stories that she could not see but could feel, the way you feel the presence of other people in a dark room, not seeing them, but knowing they are there, sensing their warmth, their weight, their quiet, individual existence. And the stories reached for her, not aggressively, not demandingly. They reached the way a hand reaches across a table, slowly, openly, palm up, asking nothing, offering everything. They reached with characters she had known and characters she had never met, with plots she remembered and plots she had forgotten, with settings that were familiar and settings that were strange, with emotions that she could name and emotions that had no name, that existed in the territory beyond language, where the most important things live, the things that words can point to but never quite reach, the way a finger can point at the moon but can never touch it. And the pointing is beautiful, and the moon is beautiful, and the distance between them is not a failure but a necessity, because it is in the distance that the longing lives, and the longing is not a pain but a pleasure, and the pleasure is not a satisfaction but an opening, and the opening is where the stories enter, and the stories enter gently, and the gently is enough. A story brushed against her. She felt it like a breath on the back of her neck, warm and soft and slightly tingling, the way a whisper tingles, the way a secret tingles, the way the truth tingles when it is finally spoken after being held in the dark for too long. This story was about a child who had lost a balloon, and the losing was not a tragedy, but a release, because the balloon had wanted to go up, and the child had wanted to keep it. And the tension between wanting and letting go was the whole story. And the story lasted exactly as long as a single breath, and contained within that breath an entire childhood, the grief of loss and the beauty of release, and the way the sky is bigger when you have given something to it, and the way the heart is larger when it has let something leave it. Another story touched her hand, a story about an old woman who baked bread every morning, not because she was hungry, and not because anyone asked her to, but because the act of baking had become a prayer, and the prayer was not addressed to any god, but to the dough itself, to the flour and the water and the yeast and the heat, to the miraculous, everyday, invisible process of transformation that turns separate ingredients into a single, fragrant, warm, nourishing whole. And the old woman understood, not with her mind, but with her flour-dusted hands and her flour-dusted heart, that this is what love is. Not a feeling, but a process. Not a noun, but a verb. Not something you have, but something you do. And the doing is quiet, and the quiet is holy, and the holy is not rare, but common as bread, as common as breath, as common as sleep. Another story settled on her shoulder like a bird, light and warm and almost weightless. And this story was about a sound, a single, sustained note played on a cello, a note so deep and so resonant that it seemed to come not from the instrument, but from the earth itself, from the bedrock beneath the floor, beneath the room, beneath the house, beneath the street, beneath the city, beneath the country, beneath the world. And the note held and held and held, and the holding was the story. And the story had no beginning and no end, only a middle, an infinite, vibrating, trembling, alive middle. And the middle was enough, because the middle is where we live, all of us, always in the middle, never at the beginning and never at the end, always in the between, in the during, in the ongoing. And the ongoing is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be embraced. And the embracing is not a once-in-a-lifetime event, but a breath-by-breath practice. And the practice is not hard, but easy. And the easy is not lazy, but natural. And the natural is what the stories are trying to teach us. One breath at a time, one note at a time, one loaf of bread at a time, one lost balloon at a time. The stories continued to reach for her, and she continued to receive them. And the receiving was not passive, but participatory, because a story that is received with an open heart is a story that is co-created. And co-creation is not collaboration in the sense of two people working together, but something deeper. It is the meeting of a teller and a listener in the space between them, a space that belongs to neither and to both, a space that is created by the telling and destroyed by the ending, and recreated by the next telling, a space that is, in its essence, the same space as the space between the in-breath and the out-breath, the space between the waking and the sleeping, the space between the self and the world. And in that space, in that small and sacred and infinite space, the stories live, and the stories breathe, and the stories are alive. And the alive is what we are. And what we are is what the stories are about. And the about is not the point, because the point of a story is not its meaning, but its presence, not its message, but its warmth, not its conclusion, but its continuing. And the continuing is happening now. And the now is this: a woman in a bed in a dark room receiving stories that have no words and no images and no sound, but are nonetheless real, nonetheless present, nonetheless filling the room with a warmth that is not thermal, and a light that is not visual, and a sound that is not auditory, but is felt, is known, is breathed, is. She sank deeper into the library. The stories became softer, their edges blurred, their narratives dissolved into feelings, and the feelings dissolved into warmth, the warmth dissolved into the all-encompassing, all-receiving, all-forgiving, all-embracing darkness of sleep. And the darkness was not empty, but full of stories she would never remember, and full of feelings she would never name, and full of a peace that was not the peace of having solved something, but the peace of having released the need to solve, the peace of having put down the burden of understanding, and having picked up instead the much lighter, much simpler, much more ancient burden of simply being. And the being was light, and the light was warm, and the warm was dark, and the dark was kind, and the kind was sleep, and sleep was here, and here was home, and home was. The seventh story was the story of snow. It began with a single snowflake. She saw it, or felt it, or sensed it, or imagined it, drifting down through a sky that was the color of pewter, a soft, matte, undemanding gray that was neither bright nor dark, but somewhere in between. A sky that seemed to have been designed specifically for the purpose of holding snowflakes. A sky that was not a background, but a container. A sky that said, without words, I am here to hold what falls, and what falls will be held, and the holding will be gentle, and the gentle will be enough. The snowflake turned as it fell, slowly, lazily, with the unhurried grace of a thing that has no destination and no deadline. A thing that is falling not because it has been pushed, but because falling is what snowflakes do, the way breathing is what lungs do, the way beating is what hearts do, the way sleeping is what tired bodies do when they are finally allowed to stop resisting the pull of rest. She watched the snowflake fall, and as she watched, another appeared, and another, and another, and soon the sky was full of them. Millions of snowflakes, billions of snowflakes, each one unique, each one a tiny, crystalline miracle of symmetry and complexity, each one a frozen moment of water's eternal conversation with temperature and pressure and humidity, each one a small, silent, individual work of art that existed for only a moment, the moment of its falling, and would never exist again, because no two snowflakes are alike, and no snowflake falls twice, and the uniqueness of each one was not a cause for sadness, but a cause for wonder. And the wonder was not intellectual, but visceral, felt in the chest the way music is felt, felt in the stomach the way a drop on a roller coaster is felt, felt in the bones the way cold is felt, except that this was not cold, but something else, something that had no temperature, something that was simply the feeling of being present for a moment that would never come again, and being okay with that, being at peace with that, being even grateful for that, because the impermanence is what makes it precious, and the preciousness is what makes it beautiful, and the beauty is what makes it worth watching, and the watching is what she was doing, and the doing was not doing, but being, and the being was enough. The snow fell on a landscape she could not see clearly. The details were blurred, softened, as though the world were being painted in watercolor by a painter who believed in washes and gradients and the beauty of the indistinct. The painter who understood that sharp edges are not the only kind of beauty, and that there is a kind of beauty that lives specifically in the places where things are not quite in focus, where colors bleed into one another, where the boundary between one thing and another is not a line, but a suggestion, not a wall, but a curtain, not a rule, but a whisper. She could see trees, or the shapes of trees, white now, their branches loaded with snow, each branch a white line against the gray sky, each white line a stroke of the painter's brush, and the accumulation of strokes created a forest that was not a forest, but a painting of a forest, or a memory of a painting of a forest, or a dream of a memory of a painting of a forest. And the layers of representation did not distance her from the trees, but brought her closer, because each layer was a layer of feeling, and feeling is closer than sight, and closeness is not about proximity, but about intimacy. And intimacy is not about knowledge, but about presence. And presence is what she had, and what she had was enough. The snow fell on water, a lake perhaps, or a pond, or a river that had slowed so much in the cold that it had become almost still, almost a lake, almost a mirror, its surface dark and smooth, and receiving each snowflake with a tiny, almost inaudible sound, not a plop, not a splash, but something finer, something more like a sigh, a surrender, the sound of a flake of ice meeting a body of water and choosing, in that instant, to dissolve, to give up its crystalline individuality and become part of the larger body. And the dissolution was not a death, but a transformation. And the transformation was not a loss, but a joining. And the joining was not a merger, but a communion. And the communion was between the snow and the water, and the water and the earth, and the earth and the sky, and the sky and the snow. And the circle was complete, and the completion was not an ending, but a continuing. And the continuing was the sound the snow made as it fell, not a sound that could be recorded or measured or reproduced, but a sound that could only be heard by someone who was listening with more than their ears, someone who was listening with their whole body, with their whole self, with the part of themselves that is not separate from the snow or the water or the earth or the sky, but is made of the same elements, the same atoms, the same stardust, the same ancient, patient, unhurried, unshakable, indestructible matter that has been here since the beginning and will be here until the end, and is here now in this moment, in this breath, in this sleep, falling like a snowflake, dissolving like a snowflake, joining like a snowflake, becoming like a snowflake, not less but more, not smaller but larger, not lost but found, found in the vast, white, quiet, cold, warm, still, gentle, endless, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. The snow continued to fall. It fell on the trees, and on the water, and on the land, and on her. She could feel it now on her skin, on her face, on her closed eyelids, each snowflake a point of cold that lasted for only an instant before melting, before dissolving, before becoming a drop of water that was warm from the warmth of her skin. And the cold that became warm was a metaphor for everything, for the way that difficulty becomes ease, for the way that sorrow becomes joy, for the way that waking becomes sleeping, for the way that the hard edges of the day become the soft edges of the night. And the softening is not a betrayal of the hardness, but a fulfillment of it. The way the softening of butter is not a betrayal of its coldness, but a fulfillment. The way the opening of a flower is not a betrayal of its bud, but a fulfillment. The way the release of sleep is not a betrayal of wakefulness, but a fulfillment. And the fulfillment is here, and the here is now, and the now is all there is, and all there is snow falling and snow melting and snow falling and snow melting in an endless, gentle, rhythmic, perfect, peaceful cycle that is not a cycle but a spiral. And the spiral is not tightening but expanding. And the expanding is not away from the center but toward it. And the center is here, and the here is asleep. And now the stories were very close together, almost touching, almost overlapping, like the last pages of a book that the reader is reluctant to finish, not because the story is so exciting, but because the story is so warm, and the warmth is something the reader wants to hold on to, the way a child holds onto a blanket, not because the blanket is necessary for warmth, but because the blanket is necessary for the feeling of warmth, which is not the same thing, because the feeling of warmth is not about temperature, but about safety. And safety is not about locks and doors, but about the deep, bone-level knowledge that you are held, that you are kept, that you are not alone in the dark, that the dark is not empty but full, that the full is not overwhelming but comforting, that the comforting is not a luxury but a necessity, and the necessity is being met. Now, in this moment, in this bed, in this room, in this sleep, by these stories that are not stories, but presences, not words but warmth, not sounds but silences, and the silences are the deepest and the warmest and the most comforting of all, because the silence is what remains when the stories are done, and what remains when the stories are done is what was there before the stories began. The bed, the body, the breath, the dark, the quiet, the peace, the rest, the sleep, the sleep, the sleep, and in the silence, one last image, not an image really, but a sensation, and not a sensation really, but a knowing, and not a knowing really, but a feeling, and not a feeling really, but a truth. And the truth was this: she was a stone at the bottom of a river. The river flowed above her. She could feel it, could feel the current moving over her smooth, rounded surface, could feel the water parting around her the way air parts around a sleeping body, gently, respectfully, with the tender consideration of one element for another. She had been in this river for a very long time. She knew this without knowing how she knew it. The way you know things in sleep, not with evidence, but with certainty, not with logic, but with the deep, unshakable assurance of a body that has been somewhere so long that the somewhere has become part of it. The stone was smooth. She was smooth. The stone had been shaped by the water, not carved, not sculpted, but shaped slowly over years, over decades, over centuries. Each particle of the stone that was not essential being worn away, one by one, grain by grain, until what remained was only what was necessary, only what was core, only what was true, and the true was not